Merlin was born in Britain, an island in Western Europe, in the 5th century, a time of war and chaos following the retreat of the Romans who had dominated the region for centuries. His father was a demon, an evil spirit who appeared to a woman named Adhan, the daughter of a minor king of South Wales, and left her pregnant. Her mother was virtuous and pious, unaware of her lover's true nature. The demon had conceived Merlin to create an evil being who would use his supernatural powers to corrupt and destroy men. However, the plan was thwarted by the intervention of a holy man named Blas, who baptized Merlin at birth, thus freeing him from the devil's influence. Blas became Merlin's guardian and protector, teaching him the secrets of nature, magic, and prophecy. Merlin grew up as a child prodigy, gifted with great intelligence, a prodigious memory, and an extraordinary ability to communicate with animals, plants, and the elements. He also had the gift of seeing the past and the future and changing shape at will. However, he was also aware of his dark origins and the responsibility of having so many gifts. Therefore, he strove to use them for good and to help those in need. When Merlin was 12 years old, an event changed his destiny. The king of Britain, Constantius, had died without leaving an heir, and the throne had been usurped by a tyrant named Vortigern, who had murdered the nobles and the king's relatives. Vortigern faced the threat of the Saxons, barbarians who had invaded the island from the mainland and intended to conquer it. Vortigern built a great tower on a hill to defend himself from the Saxons. For this, he recruited many workers and artisans. However, every time a part of the tower was erected, it collapsed the next day without anyone knowing the cause. Vortigern consulted his magicians and soothsayers, and they told him that the only way to prevent the collapse was to sacrifice a fatherless child and mix its blood with the mortar of the tower. Vortigern's emissaries searched the kingdom for a child who fulfilled this condition. Finally, they found Merlin, who lived with his mother in a village. They brought him before the king and told him that they would kill him to save the tower. Merlin mocked them and said to them that their sacrifice was useless, for the real problem was that under the hill was a lake, and under the lake were 2 dragons, one red and one white, fighting each other and making the earth tremble with their roars and their blows. Merlin challenged the wizards and soothsayers to prove that he was lying and challenged them to dig up the hill and discover the lake and the dragons. Vortigern ordered that what Merlin said be done, and to everyone's surprise it turned out that the boy was right. When the lake was drained, the 2 dragons appeared and engaged in a fierce battle, ending with the red dragon's victory over the white dragon. Merlin then explained that the dragons were a sign of destiny and represented Britain's future. The white dragon symbolized the Saxons, and the red dragon the Britons. The victory of the red dragon meant that the Britons would succeed in expelling the Saxons, but only under the command of a great king, who had not yet been born and who would be the son of King Constantius and Vortigern's daughter, named Igraine. Vortigern was impressed by Merlin's words and spared his life. He asked him to stay with him and to help him with his advice and prophecies. Merlin agreed, but only on the condition that Vortigern would return the throne to Constantius's rightful heir, Aurelius Ambrosius, who was in exile in Gaul. Vortigern refused, and Merlin warned him that his reign would be brief and unhappy and that he would die at the hands of Aurelius Ambrose. Merlin escaped from Vortigern's court and went to Gaul, where he met Aurelius Ambrosius, the rightful heir of Britannia. He told him what had happened and encouraged him to reclaim his throne, promising his support and loyalty. Aurelius Ambrose assembled an army of exiled Britons and enlisted the Roman emperor's help, who sent him troops and supplies. Aurelius Ambrose landed in Britain and confronted Vortigern, who had gathered his forces and Saxon allies. The battle was bloody, but Aurelius Ambrose was victorious in the end. Vortigern was burned to death in his tower, thus fulfilling Merlin's prophecy. Aurelius Ambrose was proclaimed king of Britain and set about restoring order and peace to the kingdom. Merlin became Aurelius Ambrose's advisor and friend and helped him in his plans and projects. One was erecting a monument in memory of the fallen in the battle against Vortigern. For this purpose, Merlin suggested bringing the giant stones to a place in Ireland called the Ring of Giants. These stones had magical powers and had been brought from Africa by giants who used them for healing and rituals. Aurelius Ambrose sent his brother Uther and a group of soldiers and craftsmen to Ireland to bring the stones. Merlin accompanied them and showed them how to move and transport the vast rocks using magic and ingenuity. Thus, they carried the stones to Britain and placed them in a circle, forming the famous Stonehenge monument still preserved today. Aurelius Ambrose reigned with justice and wisdom and managed to contain the invasions of the Saxons and other barbarian peoples. However, his reign was short-lived, for he was poisoned to death by a Saxon disguised as a physician, who gave him a deadly concoction. Before his death, Aurelius Ambrosius named his brother Uther his successor and entrusted Merlin to guide and protect him. Uther Pendragon was Aurelius Ambrose's younger brother and succeeded him to the throne of Britannia after his death. He was a brave and warlike man, but also impulsive and passionate. Merlin stood by his side and advised and helped him in his affairs. One was the love he felt for Igraine, the wife of the Duke of Cornwall, Gorlas. Uther met Igraine at a party he held at his palace and was smitten by her beauty and grace. Igraine was a noble and virtuous woman and did not reciprocate Uther's interests but remained faithful to her husband. Uther, however, did not resign and declared his love for her, asking her to go with him. Igraine refused and asked him to leave her alone. Gorlos learned of Uther's intentions and felt offended and betrayed. He decided to rebel against the king, taking his wife and daughters to his castle of Tintagel, a fortress on a cliff surrounded by the sea and high walls. Enraged, Uther declared war on him and marched with his army toward Cornwall, ready to conquer the castle and take Igraine away. Merlin tried to dissuade Uther from his endeavor and told him that his passion was blind and disorderly and could bring him dire consequences. He reminded him that his duty was to rule with justice and prudence and not to be carried away by his desires. He also warned him that the Saxons would take advantage of his absence to attack the kingdom, and that he would endanger the peace and security of Britannia. Uther did not listen to Merlin and told him he could not live without Igraine and was ready to do anything for her. He asked him to help him get her love and to use his magic to facilitate her access to the castle. Merlin agreed, but only on the condition that Uther would give him the son who would be born of his union with Igraine and who would be the future king of Britannia. Uther agreed, and Merlin gave him a concoction that allowed him to change form and take on the appearance of Gorlas. Merlin and Uther infiltrated the castle of Tintagel, taking advantage of the night's darkness and the battle's confusion. Merlin posed as one of Gorlas' knights, and Uther as the duke himself. Thus, they reached Igraine's chamber, which received them without suspicion. Uther slept with Igraine and made her his own while Merlin stood guard at the door. Uther and Merlin left the castle the next day and returned to their original form. Uther learned that Gorlas had been killed in battle and that the palace had surrendered. Uther then went to St. Paul's Cathedral, where Igraine, who had been brought there by the bishops, was staying. Uther revealed the truth to her and asked her to marry him. Igraine, shocked and hurt, did not know what to do. On the one hand, she felt deceived and outraged by Uther, but on the other hand, she was attracted to him and knew that she was pregnant with his child. Moreover, the bishops and nobles advised her to accept Uther's proposal to avoid further conflict and bloodshed. Thus, Igraine agreed to marry Uther and became Queen of Britannia. Merlin, for his part, fulfilled his pact with Uther and took the son born of his union with Igraine, who was named Arthur. Merlin gave him to a faithful knight, Sir Hector, who raised him as if he were his son without revealing his true identity. Merlin watched Arthur's growth and education, preparing him for the day when he would claim his throne and become the greatest king of Britain. Merlin was King Arthur's faithful advisor and friend and helped him establish his kingdom of Camelot, where justice, peace, and chivalry reigned. Merlin was also the mentor of the Knights of the Round Table, whom he instructed in the arts and sciences and revealed the secrets of nature and magic to them. Merlin accompanied them on many adventures and protected them from danger and betrayal. However, according to different versions, Merlin was not immune to love and fell in love with a young and beautiful sorceress named Viviana, Nimue, or Niniana. She was the Lady of the Lake, a powerful fairy who lived on an enchanted island surrounded by a magical lake. Merlin met the Lady of the Lake when he went to ask her to lend him her boat to take Arthur to the island of Avalon, where she gave him the sword Excalibur, forged by the gods. Merlin was smitten by the beauty and grace of the Lady of the Lake and asked her to be his mistress. She accepted, but only on the condition that he would teach her all his secrets and spells. Merlin agreed and revealed to her all he knew, trusting that she would be faithful to him and love him forever. However, the Lady of the Lake had other plans and only wanted to take advantage of Merlin and get rid of him when he no longer applied to her. The Lady of the Lake pretended to love Merlin and followed him in his travels and quests. One day, she asked him to show her where the entrance to the other world, the realm of fairies and spirits, was located. Merlin took him to a cave in the forest of Brocelianda and told him that a secret door could only be opened with a chant. The Lady of the Lake asked him to show her the spell, and Merlin told her. Then, the Lady of the Lake pushed him into the cave, pronounced the magic, and closed the door behind him. Merlin was trapped in the other world, unable to leave and communicate with anyone. The Lady of the Lake departed, taking Merlin's knowledge and powers with her, leaving him abandoned. Merlin realized that he had been deceived and lamented his fate. However, he did not lose hope and trusted that someday, someone would free him and return him to the world of the living. In the meantime, he continued to observe and prophesy the events in Britain, especially those affecting Arthur and his knights.